Okay, well, good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us on this Thursday. As you all know by now, we have moved from an everyday format for these calls to a twice-a-week format. We believe this is a good way to go to continue to give you some very timely, relevant information for your operation, but also, it reflects the new reality that many companies are going back to work and getting back in your normal daily routines and don't have as much time for a daily call. So we think this is a nice medium point, and we had a good turnout and a good call on Tuesday, and very excited about this call today. This is extremely timely, given some of the happenings right now in Washington regarding PPP. So we do have several other things to update on, but today our special guest is Cheryl Peterson. Many of you know Cheryl. Cheryl's been on previous calls. She is our Small Business Development Center consultant based at the Armory. We work very closely with her. She's done an absolutely amazing job through not only this whole process with the virus, but even before that, she served so many great small businesses in Shiawassee County, providing very, very valuable counseling. And the purpose today of having Cheryl on is to help provide some updates on guidance from the federal government, from the SBA, as it relates to PPP loan forgiveness. So as I know is probably true for many on the call, the two big issues out there right now, one is reopening safely, having appropriate safety plans, having the appropriate personal protective equipment for your workers and your customers and all that. But two is making sure that you get all of your paperwork done appropriately so that the PPP money that you got doesn't stay a loan, that it does get converted into a grant. So as many people know, it is a bit of a cumbersome process. Rules and guidelines are changing, it seems like almost daily. So we want to make sure we're staying in front of you with as much current information as possible. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Cheryl, and then she can give a rundown of what she's learned, of what's happening right now, and then we'll certainly open up the floor if anyone has any personal questions on their own business. So with that, Cheryl, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Justin, and thank you very much for that kind introduction. And good morning, everyone. I'm happy to be here again with you. Looking at the loan forgiveness process for PPP, first, some general comments about the process itself, and then we'll get more specific related to some of the details within the process. But to begin with, if you have an opportunity to deposit your PPP funds into a dedicated bank account, we have recommended that to clients, and I know that some of the lenders have recommended that as well, because they see it as an easier way to track the expenditures against the PPP funds. So that might be something to think about if you have not done that. And then to begin to develop an expected spend down plan based upon some of the rules of the program, a couple of which have changed or we expect to change within the next couple of days. And I'll go over that in just a couple minutes. But when it gets to the point where you are submitting for forgiveness, your lender has 60 days after you deem your forgiveness package to be complete to make a decision about your forgiveness and to notify the SBA of that decision. The SBA then has 90 days within which to respond to the bank about the bank's decision on forgiveness. Now, some banks have some specific forms that they will use. The ones that I will speak from this morning are the standard forms that have been published on the Department of Treasury website. but your bank may ask for some additional pieces of documentation, or they may ask for a particular spreadsheet that they have developed for tracking. So just be in contact with your lender to know what their expectations are as you begin to gather the documentation for forgiveness. And we said in an earlier website that in an earlier webinar that documentation is really critical in being able to support the purposes of the funds that you received from the PPP program. So be very, very diligent about your documentation. Now, there are several forms in this package that's been published by the Department of Treasury. There is the loan forgiveness application calculation form. There is a PPP Schedule A form, and there is a PPP Schedule A worksheet form. The first two forms, the calculation form and the Schedule A, are the two that are required at this point to be submitted for forgiveness. The worksheet is something that you need to keep and maintain with your documentation, as well as payroll records, receipts of non-payroll costs that you have paid, and those types of documents that will support your request for forgiveness. You need to retain those documents for 6 years from the date of the forgiveness or from the date of paying off a loan that might exist after the forgiveness decision is made. Some of the banks are beginning to publish information on their websites about the forgiveness process. So if you haven't checked on your bank's website or talked directly with your lender, that might be a good thing to do. Other banks are still saying that they're not quite ready to publish that information yet, but that it is coming. I think the message here that's important is to stay in contact with your lender and make sure that you understand what they will be expecting from you. Now, a bit of an update in terms of yesterday in Washington. Many of you may know that the Senate did pass some of the revisions related to the PPP program. It will, of course, go to the president for signature before it becomes enacted. So we're a little bit premature because it's not signed into law yet, but I wanted to share with you what some of those anticipated changes in the PPP provisions will be if it is signed into law, and then we would expect the SBA and Department of Treasury to issue further guidance. But these are some of the changes. The covered period has been defined as the 8 weeks that begins on the day that you receive the PPP funds into your business bank account. And the 8-week clock starts ticking on that date. The 8-week period has also been defined as 56 days. So you would get referenced both ways. That 8-week period, if this is enacted, will become 24 weeks, or the end of this calendar year, December 31st, whichever date occurs first. So once again, the 8 weeks is being elongated to 24 weeks, or December 31st, whichever of those two dates comes first. Now, the borrower has an option here to stay with the 8 weeks. So if you've been on an 8-week plan because you were approved for PPP several weeks ago now, and some of you probably were, and you're nearing the end of your 8-week period, you can choose to stay with that 8-week covered period, complete your documentation, do your calculations, and move forward with your forgiveness application. But for others of you who may have received your dollars later and you're concerned about how you are going to spend them all down in the 8-week period, if this is signed into law, that period will stretch to 24 weeks, or December 31st. As you know, there was a requirement for at least 75% of the funds to be spent on payroll and no more than 25% on non-payroll costs. We also expect with this new legislation that will change. The payroll requirement will be reduced to 60%. And then, of course, the non-payroll costs can be up to 40%. Now, the two things that I talked about thus far, I have seen in multiple sources. This next statement that I will share with you, I have only seen in one source since yesterday. So please bear that in mind. And that relates to at least 60% of the funds spent on payroll. Under the previous guidance, the 75%, if you didn't spend 75% of the funds on payroll, you would have gotten a reduction in your forgiveness. There is language out there from one source that says the new rule may be that if you don't spend at least 60% of your funds on payroll, you will not get any forgiveness. So it's being described as a cliff. You have to reach the 60% in order to receive forgiveness. Again, I would remind you, I have only found that from one source. So we need to be sure of the position on that particular issue once this has been signed into law. Another concern for several borrowers was the June 30th date, that borrowers were given until June 30th to return their FTE count to the count that they had at the time of their application, and they had until June 30th to restore wages and salaries to the earlier wage and salary levels that were used in your application calculation. That as well is being extended. So those time periods for rehiring instead of June 30th are stretched now to December 31st, 2020 in this new revision. You may well be familiar with the safe harbor dates and requirements that were a part of PPP, and there seems to be some additional flexibility now built into the safe harbor requirement. And so we'll be looking for what the SBA's guidance is around some of those changes and allowances of greater flexibility. The one that seems to be most notable is that businesses may not receive or may not be subject to a reduction in forgiveness if they can document their inability to return to the same level of business that they had prior to the pandemic. But we're going to need to see exactly what that language is and how the SBA develops guidance for it. And one issue that is outstanding, and it's not, to my understanding, it is not a part of what was approved by the Senate yesterday, but there is some movement among some of the lenders to encourage a floor to be set on the amount of the loan so that borrowers who received a loan less than X would not have to go through all of the calculations, some of which can be kind of complicated, and file those calculations as a part of their forgiveness. So if the loan amount was below a certain level, some lenders are advocating that those smaller loans be forgiven through a certification by the borrower that they followed the appropriate rule. Now, again, that's not a part of what was approved yesterday, but it is something that is being advocated in certain situations. I think I will stop there because then we will go on and talk about some of the things that have existed previously in the world of PPP forgiveness. But this might be a good time to ask if there are any questions about what occurred yesterday.
Thank you, Cheryl. Great update so far. I do have one, but I want to open it up. If anyone has any specific questions for Cheryl, please hit *6 on your phone, please. *6. Any specific questions for Cheryl right now? Okay, well, Cheryl, I will save my question until the end, so go ahead and continue.
Okay, so I just wanted to review some of the basics of the rules that have been in place that were issued the latter part of May. One of them, of course, is the covered period, which we've already addressed this morning, but there is also an alternative payroll covered period that is allowed. And this is allowed for businesses who pay every other week or more frequently so that they can use an entire pay period as a beginning point and an ending point for their payroll costs. So your covered period, and let's stay with the 8 weeks for right now as an example, your covered period would begin at the date that you receive the funds and proceed for the next 8 weeks. Or you could elect to use the alternative payroll covered period, which would begin on the first day of a new payroll after you received your funds and proceed for the next 8 weeks. The thing to remember is that if you make that election to the alternative payroll covered period, anything that speaks to that covered period in the forgiveness guidelines, you have to stay with your choice. So if they're asking you one question and you choose the alternative period, and then there's another question and you about payroll and you go back to the covered period, you can't do that. So if you make the election to go to the alternative payroll covered period, you have to stay with that through all of the calculations related to loan forgiveness. One of the things that we have talked about in the past, and was it permissible, that was around the question of hazard pay, and that is now identified as an appropriate payroll cost. And can be included in your PPP spend down. And early on, they were telling us that bonuses would not be an acceptable payroll cost, but in the guidance that was issued the latter part of May, the word bonuses was included in acceptable payroll costs. Then moving to the non-payroll side, you know that these are for mortgage interest, rent and lease payments, interest, and costs. And there's one statement that was published in the latter part of May that was new compared to previous, and that is this: that a non-payroll cost is one that is paid during the covered period or incurred during the covered period and paid on or before the next regular billing date, even if that billing date is after the covered period. So let me use this example. The covered period is June 1 to July 26. The borrower pays its May and June electric bills during the covered period, and it pays its July electric bill on August 10th, which is the next regular date. you can seek forgiveness for the May bill that you paid, the June bill that you paid, because they were paid during the covered period. But in addition, you can seek forgiveness for the portion of the July bill through July 26th, which is the end of your covered period. So just note that that is something that came out the latter part of May. I wanted to make sure that you were aware of it. Now, there are some issues that could cause you to experience a reduction in the amount of your forgiveness. And we're not going to go into the details of that today because that could be an entire session just on its own. But let me say this much about those. There are two of them. One is your FTE count, and the second is any reduction in salary or hourly wage that might have occurred during this time period. So you would convert your number of employees to the number of full-time equivalents and compare your covered period with a reference period prior to COVID. And you have two options about the dates that those covered periods could be. You choose which of those reference periods you want to use. I suggest to people that they choose the one that is the smallest in number of FTEs. So if you reduce your FTEs in the covered period compared to the reference period, that could cause a reduction in your loan forgiveness. In the same way, if you reduce salaries or hourly wages by more than 25% in the covered period compared to the reference period, that could also cause a reduction in your loan forgiveness. But with what happened yesterday, it extends. You have until June 30th to get those two benchmarks back up to pre-COVID levels. But with what happened yesterday, if that is signed into law, that June 30th deadline for recovery is stretched to the end of December. So that makes it much more likely that a business would be able to comply than if they're just trying to do this between the time that they got their loan and the safe harbor date of June 30th. I think those are the primary things that I wanted to share with you around the issue of loan forgiveness. I will say this before we open it back up to questions. If you are doing these calculations yourself, I would encourage you to have a second set of eyes on those before you submit them for forgiveness. They can be somewhat complex. They can be a little bit difficult to do. You sometimes have to read the information carefully to know what you're being asked for. So just for your own advantage, I would recommend that if you're doing these yourself, you have an accountant, a CPA, someone who is familiar with the program to get a second set of eyes on your forgiveness application. And with that, we can open it up to any other questions.
Thank you, Cheryl. Awesome information. My question, and I'll open it up here in a second. My question is actually a little bit outside the box. Most of our companies got in quick. Now, we had, quite a few, obviously, that were in round 2, but a lot of them got in round 1, and a lot of them are at the point now where they are getting to that 8 weeks and ready to file their paperwork. Here's my question. You still have over $100 billion sitting there in Washington that has not been used yet, so the pipeline has slowed down greatly for this money. Is there any option, if a company is successful in one PPP loan, to go back and get another one?
I don't think we have the answer to that yet, but I think there could be some movement in that regard because a few weeks ago there was a lot of encouragement to businesses that might not have applied yet for their loan because there was money available to be used. So I think that's something to watch. We don't, at least I am not aware of any guidance on that at this point. The other thing that I think is important here is that some businesses, because they were worried about this June 30th date and whether or not they were going to be open and operational by that date, and some of them had told they probably would not be, they elected not to go the route of PPP because they weren't going to have a source of income to pay those employees once their covered period ended. Those businesses may also now have an opportunity to apply for a PPP loan because of extending these deadlines to the end of this calendar year. Again, these things remain to be seen as more guidance rolls out from the SBA and the Department of Treasury.
Yeah, I mean, things are changing, quite rapidly. I just, the issue I see here is, a lot of companies are not yet back up to where they need to be in terms of employment to meet the parameters, and being able to have that extended time, I think, is wonderful. But on the flip side, a number of companies have been, reasonably successful. I don't know. I'm thinking out loud here. Obviously, I see money in Washington. I know many businesses here are still being greatly impacted by the economy. And so, I just, the more money we can get flowing into Shiawassee County, the better.
Right. I think you raise a good point, Justin, and we just need to be reading carefully and processing carefully to make sure that we're recognizing every opportunity that businesses might have as we go forward.
Yep. And then actually, I just have one last, and then I'll open it up again. And this is actually a little off topic, but the other primary program that had been promoted for a long time but got shut down for applicants was the EIDL program through SBA. Do you have any quick updates on that?
I'll just make a couple of comments to that. We are seeing EIDL funds coming to businesses within our community. And a couple of those businesses had not received the loan advance. What we had seen as the typical process was that they would receive the loan advance deposited into their business banking account, often with no advance warning, and then receive an offer from the SBA for the EIDL loan. Most recently, the feedback that we've had from the SBA and from clients who have called the SBA 800 number is that now the loan advance and the loan are more likely to occur simultaneously. So it looks like there's a little shift in the process around the timing of the loan advance and the timing of the loan offer. For those of you that haven't seen an offer, let's say that a business is offered a loan of $100,000. But as that business evaluates that offer, there is a place in the response to that loan offer where they can adjust the $100,000 downward if they choose to do that. So it's not an all or nothing at the amount offered. You could adjust that if you felt that was the best thing to do for your business.
Okay, very good. All right, any comments or questions for Cheryl? If you do, hit *6 on your phone, please. Anybody have anything for Cheryl?
Hey, Justin, it's Randy Beatty. I got actually a couple of questions for Cheryl. Cheryl, with the PPP loan, returning your full-time equivalents to the number equal to or higher, is that calculation done over the 8-week period, or do you need to maintain those FTEs all the way through June 30th or beyond?
You do your calculation based upon the 8-week period compared to the reference period, which is one of those 2 times that you choose prior to the pandemic. If you fall short in the covered period, you were given until June 30th to recover back to the pre-COVID level.
Okay.
Now, though, if that June 30th deadline is going to be stretched until the end of December, businesses will have even more time to restore either their FTEs or their wages.
Okay, but it's the 8-week. I mean, if you restored it in the 8-week period, then you don't have to worry about the future past that.
That is my understanding.
Okay.
I don't have that in writing from the SBA, but that was my understanding of the interpretation. And now, if the time period is extended, that could change that considerably.
Okay. The second question I have is with the EIDL loans, a lot of the wording you see is they talk about here's what we're going to do. And there are sections that talk about if you need more funds and you apply for additional funds. Has that been shut off on the EDL loans now, or is it still possible to apply for additional?
It's not my understanding that there is that option right now.
Okay, so they eliminated that part of it. Okay, that's all I had. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Randy. Other questions for Cheryl? Comments? Hit *6 on your phone, please. Anybody else? Okay, Cheryl, if people do have specific questions for you, what's the best way to reach you?
Email cpeterson@shiawassee-chamber.org.
Okay, very good.
And again, I would say a lot of the things that we talked about today just are occurring right now. President Trump hasn't signed it yet. The SBA, Department of Treasury, hasn't issued any guidance. So, being attuned to what's coming out in printed material will be really important over the next few weeks to know exactly how these things are all going to interact together.
And obviously, we will continue to share information as it becomes relevant. Cheryl, if you have anything you want me to pass along by email, or if you want to come on a future call, definitely let me know. But thank you for all the great work you've been doing.
You're welcome. Have a good day.
All right. Thanks, Cheryl. All right. Well, great update. Once again, if you have questions for her, cpeterson@shiawassee-chamber.org, or you can message me, or of course, as Cheryl said, talk to your lender on this. Couple of other things real quick. Wanted to highlight, you did get an email from me last night. We have booked our cybersecurity webinar. We're actually co-hosting that with Cheryl, the SBDC, and the Shiawassee Regional Chamber. It's going to be next Thursday, a week from today, 10 o'clock, and it'll be an opportunity for companies that are in need of some guidance, some wisdom on how to deal with cybersecurity issues, particularly in today's world where many of you may be working from home, off the company system, so to speak, on your laptop. So really, I think a great opportunity to learn some tips on how to deal with hacking and other things like that. And I think what's really interesting about this is it's being led by a company that is now going to be locating in Shiawassee County. So I know you guys all probably see TV commercials for cybersecurity and virus blockers and all that. Well, we now will have a company in Shiawassee County that can offer that, a local service. So that's wonderful news. Great to add another tech business to the area. BitLift is the name of the business. So Jason Miller, the president and owner, will be the presenter on that. So hopefully you can join us. Also, sent out some information. Actually, it's happening in about 23 minutes. We will be doing a conference call on that PACE financing. That is for companies looking to do energy efficiency improvements. So please join us for that. That was another email. And then another webinar is going to be on the 9th next week. It's being offered through our state association, Michigan Economic Developers Association, related to workforce and talent issues. So coming out of the COVID-19 crisis, what does that mean for the talent pool and attracting talent to your business and retaining talent? So also sent out information on that. So wanted to call attention to all those events. If you have questions on any of them, let me know. PPE safety plans, been getting a lot of comments and questions on that in the last few days. We did send out an updated spreadsheet. We continue to add companies that have Shiawassee County ties who can provide masks, hand sanitizer, all the different things, temperature screenings. The spreadsheet I sent out had 18 companies. We've actually added another company since then, so we have 19 companies now. So if you have any needs at all related to that, please let us know, or email myself or Jody on our team. She's one who did a great job putting that together. Also sent out a fair amount of information on just reopening strategies. So let's see. At the end of last week, we sent out a website from MIOSHA. MIOSHA has some pretty good guidance right now. Sent out some information from our health department director, Larry Johnson, in terms of a checklist of what you need to be thinking about. So long story short, there's resources out there for reopening. If any of you have specific business needs as it relates to reopening, creating your safety plan, all that, please do let us know. And along with that, a reminder, testing is always available from our friends at Memorial Healthcare. The next, so we're doing these calls, as you know, 2 times a week. Next Thursday, excited to have our friends from Baker College come on. They're doing some great things at the college as it relates to education and training. So wanted to give them an opportunity. I know many of you work with Baker now, but they are looking to establish some additional business and community relationships. So we'll have some folks from Baker on our call next Thursday, and I'm also working on lining somebody up for Tuesday as well. And then the last thing, as always, if anyone's hiring, please let me know. You might have seen on social media, if you follow me, we are having our first job fair since the before the crisis. National Composites in Wasatch Charter Township, they are going to be doing a hiring event at the end of June. I know they're working with our friends from Michigan Works on that as well. So that's all I have right now. If anyone has any comments or questions, now would be the time. Hit *6 on your phone. Anybody have anything? Okay, well, once again, thank you. Appreciate your time. We will be back on again next Tuesday. Hopefully this format's working well for you all. In the meantime, if you need anything, get a hold of us. Call or email. Thanks, everybody.